I'm Ivelisse Page, and thanks for listening to the Believe Big podcast, the show where we take a deep dive into your healing with health experts, integrative practitioners, biblical faith leaders, and cancer thrivers from around the globe. Welcome to today's episode on the Believe Big podcast. My name is Ivelisse Page, and it's an honor to be with you today. Today's guest is Dr. Tom Cowan. Dr. Cowan is a well-known alternative medicine doctor, author, and speaker with a common sense, holistic approach to health and wellness. He has given countless lectures and workshops throughout the United States on a variety of subjects in health and medicine, and is the author of 6 books. Recent publications include The Contagion Myth, Cancer and the New Biology of Water, and The Human Heart, Cosmic Heart. Until his recent retirement from active practice, Dr. Cowan had a general medical practice for 17 years in San Francisco, preceded by 17 years in Peterborough, New Hampshire, and several years in upstate New York. He was a founding board member of the Weston A. Price Foundation and currently serves as its vice president. Dr. Cowan continues to actively lecture and interview, sharing information via his website, drtomcowan.com, where he also offers many of the products he has used personally and in his practice. Additionally, Dr. Cowan offers high-quality, beyond organic vegetable powders, pantry and pasture products on his drcowansgarden.com website, health and wellness support services at thenewbiologyclinic.com, and educational opportunities for practitioners and others at thenewbiologycurriculum.com. Dr. Cowan lives with his wife, Linda, on a rural farmland in upstate New York. He has 3 children, 1 stepson, and 7 thriving grandchildren. Welcome to the show, Dr. Cowan.
Thanks. And you please call me Tom.
Okay, will do. Thank you. We always begin the podcast with a question that our listeners love to find out about. So what is your favorite health tip?
So I'm going to start with something that my guess is you haven't heard before, which is in my travels through exploring what is real and what isn't in medicine, I've discovered that what we call diagnoses are not actually real biological entities. So my health tip for people is don't bother with your diagnosis because it's not real. What you have is a story, and you should pay a lot more attention to the story than any diagnosis that anybody gives you.
That's really good advice. We can step into that a little further because you have a cardinal rule that says question everything. For a patient with a cancer diagnosis, where does one start? There are so many questions. So what is most important? Let's divide into 3 parts. At the start of a diagnosis, in the middle of the journey, and someone who has clear scans. So what's most important? Questions.
To me, the most important question is I actually think that the conventional and most of the alternative holistic view of cancer has it completely wrong. And therefore, this is of huge importance to people in navigating what they're going to do about it. And I can flesh that out if you want.
Briefly, if you can briefly, because I'm sure people are listening on the other end going, what?
Scientific discord is the investigation of claims, right? Somebody makes a claim that the virus exists and it causes disease, and it investigated, found there's no such thing as viruses and they can't cause disease. So with cancer, they say that we're made of cells, which is itself a assumption, and that the cells have a mutation in the genetics of the cell, which causes the cell to grow, and then the cell grows and spreads to other places. That's called the metastases. And then when that proceeds on, then you can die from widespread metastases of your cancer. Mm-hmm. And when I tried to investigate that claim, I first of all, wondered why it is that if these cells are spreading through the bloodstream, why we can never find them in the blood. A person supposedly has a tumor in their breast, and then it somehow swims or crawls through the bloodstream and goes to their liver. If you ask your oncologist, can you show me the cancer cells in your blood? They say no. And then usually you don't ask them, why not? You just told me it's in the blood. Why don't you show it to me in the blood? Well, there's not enough of it to find in the blood, which is odd because that's how it supposedly gets there. And then I asked myself the questions. They say these cells are all messed up and the chromosomes are all abnormal and they got weird chromosomes and it's misshapen and dysfunctional and morphologically weird. And then I thought to myself, okay, and it grows better and faster than a normal cell, right? That's what we're told.
Yes.
So imagine you had a car, take it to the junkyard, and they hit it with a big wrecking ball, and the steering wheel's in the back seat, and the brakes are blown apart, and the engine is all smashed up. And the guy says, yeah, you should buy this car. It runs faster and better than a normal car. I think you would say, I don't think so. And so how is it that this dysfunctional cell is actually dividing and growing faster than a normal cell?
So
That's true.
So what is your thought on how cancer grows and spreads?
Okay. Think about this. So let me ask you questions. If you have a house, right?
Yes.
Somebody puts a bunch of garbage in the foyer of your house, stinky garbage. What would you do at that point?
Clean it up.
By putting it in bags, right?
Yes.
And then taking it out to the garage and then the curb.
Yes.
So that's what your body does. You put some stinky garbage in it. Could be toxic thoughts, poor beliefs, toxins, bad food, environmental poisons. Your body puts it into a bag. That's called a tumor. That tumor is a adaptive therapeutic response.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's if there's anything I want people to remember from this interview, the cancer is not a disease. That's why I started with that. It's your body's bagging up garbage. And then as long as you're taking it out to the curb, you're fine. But what happens if somebody puts twice as much, 3 times as much garbage in your house? You start putting it in the spare bedroom and then in the living room and then in the downstairs and then in the kitchen and then in the bedroom. And then you have to move because your house is full of garbage. Now, that garbage did not walk from your spare bedroom to the living room any more than the tumor cells, cancer cells, walked from your breast or your colon to your liver. That is a myth. It's just the accumulation of garbage and your body saying, I got to deal with this garbage, so I'm going to put it in the next available space, hoping that someday this person is going to take out the garbage.
So what is the best way for us to, in quotes, take out that garbage so that cancer does not show up in that way and take over our homes?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the first thing I would say is you have to see it like that. Once you see it like that, you will then understand every single so-called natural health treatment for cancer. They all work with don't put so much garbage in and take it out faster than you used to. So we have the Gerson diet, we have hyperthermia, we have mistletoe, we have fasting, we have eating certain diets, we have ECAT, we have saunas, we have sweat lodges, we have changing your thoughts, right? They all work. All that is not so much garbage. And by the way, do some enemas or turpentine cleansing or whatever to take more garbage out more quickly. That's how it works. No exceptions. Okay. The only people who don't do it like that is conventional oncologists, and they put more garbage in.
Interesting.
And that's why it doesn't work. Because they have a faulty conception from the get-go of what this process is all about.
Yes, I agree in the sense of they are trying to treat the symptoms, and what is there instead of getting to the root of it. And like you're saying, removing the garbage and allowing it not to have a hospitable environment for it to return. So,
Even Ivelisse, it's not even the symptoms. It's deeper than that. They're getting rid of your body's therapeutic attempt. This
yeah,
is in your body in its, I would say, infinite wisdom. Just like you get a splinter in your finger and you make pus to get the splinter out. The pus is the therapy for the splinter. It's not an infection. And if you breathe in debris, you get so-called bronchitis. That's not a disease. That's your body's way of getting out inhaled debris. And if you don't see it like that, you're going to stop the so-called bronchitis. You're going to attack the tumor. And it's not just a hospitable environment. That is your body's healing attempt.
interesting. Interesting.
Everything is. Every symptom is.
We appreciate you listening to the Believe Big podcast, where we help you discover hope, healing, and the latest breakthroughs in integrative cancer care. Later this year, we're bringing that mission to life through 2 powerful events. Join us for the Harvesting Hope Dinner in Colorado on September 25th, an inspiring evening of community, impact stories, and a chance to bring real hope to patients in need. Then, don't miss the Integrative Cancer Symposium on October 17th at the Sheraton in Towson, Maryland, or join us virtually. This one-day event brings together leading experts in integrative oncology to share the latest advancements and real-world strategies you can use today. Whether you're a patient, caregiver, or practitioner, this is where hope meets action. Find both events and reserve your spot at believebig.org under the Events tab.
Yeah. So, what has been your experience with cancer patients and alternative therapies? Because you have done this for, wow, over almost 20 years. You were in medicine helping patients. And so, was been your experience with patients and alternative therapies like mistletoe, like high dose IV vitamin C, and the things that you mentioned earlier? And those who have done it solely, or those who have done it in combination, like what has been your experience?
It all depends on the consciousness of the patient, so-called patient. I don't even like the word patient anymore. We have one person talking to another person. I can tell you that in our clinic, we just had 3 people with stage 4 cancer, so-called spread to widespread, who now are so-called clean of cancer.
Amazing.
And what the difference is, the conception of the person. If you think I have this diagnosis, I'm doomed. Like a friend of mine says, there's only one disease, and that's victim consciousness. I didn't do anything. It's my genes are bad. By the way, you can do an experiment with cancer cells and normal cells, and you can take the nucleus of a cancer cell and put it into healthy cytoplasm, the nucleus where the genes are, and the progeny will be normal. And you put the cancer nucleus in a healthy cytoplasm, so the genes are abnormal. They're supposedly in the nucleus, and the progeny will be normal. So we know that the location, so-called, of the cancer problem is not in the nucleus, so it can't have anything to do with genes or genetic. You're not a victim of any genetic anything.
Yes.
And the difference is the people who see it like this and therefore essentially change their mind and can say, yes, I have had a life where, and I need to investigate what in my life, which is different for everybody, has created this toxic environment.
Yes.
And then if I clean that up, tell the people to stop dumping garbage in your house and clean it up. It works.
It really does. And I think our minds and our emotional health, our mental and emotional health play such a huge role in cancer and past traumas and events that have occurred in our lives. And it's really important to get that garbage out. And I am a testament. I believe that was a huge part of my healing of stage 4 colon cancer way back when, 15 years ago. And then most recently in the fall with endometrial cancer, where my emotional health, my emotional tank was on empty and it affected everything. And I think that's what people don't realize is that physiologically, when you're stressed, when you're emotionally affected by things that have occurred in your life and you haven't really addressed it, your body's response is increasing that cortisol and your insulin and inflammation. And so that's why it's so important that we are also really careful about regulating our nervous system and really feeding our mind things that are true, that are noble, that are trustworthy, so that we are infused with that and can be able to move forward with peace instead of fear. So,
Right. Probably the number one toxin we all face is fear.
yes.
And believe me, that conventional doctors and conventional society understands that very well.
Yep.
Anybody who doesn't realize that hasn't paid attention to what happened with COVID.
Well, and yes, 100%. And then there's also so many studies that have been done on how fear keeps the body in fight or flight mode and not rest and repair. So there are many studies that people can look up even on PubMed, or that Dr. Kelly Turner has researched and put in her Radical Hope books and others. So there is science behind what we are discussing today. And so
And it all comes from this misconception of what so-called disease is. They tell us it's something that happens to you, when in reality, it's a way your body expresses itself to create a better situation. Always.
Yes.
You breathe in debris and you cough it up. The coughing is not the disease. The mucus is not the disease. The fever is not the disease. It's the poison getting in. That's the problem. And the poison is a lot of it, as you say, emotional and your worldview, the way you see the world.
Yes. Yeah. And it's great news for those of us who have kids who supposedly I have the genetic Lynch syndrome, and there's no fear for my kids, because actually 5% of cancers, even in the conventional world, have stated are genetically linked. And so that's
0%.
Such a small percentage.
0%.
So you say 0. Okay, I'll go with you on 0.
I know it's 0 because here, the linchpin of the genetic theory, right? Absolute dogma of the genetic theory is you got these genes, they're located on the DNA, they're in the nucleus, and each gene codes for a protein, right? That's it. If you got a wonky gene, you get a wonky protein, and then you get cancer. So then they do the Human Genome Project, find out there's 200,000 proteins in the human body and 20,000 genes, which means 90% of them don't have any genetic code at all, which means that geneticists apparently don't know how to do arithmetic, because there's no way that those proteins are coded for by genes. So the whole thing, and I could give you many reasons why that whole dogmatic way of looking at it is just make-believe. There are no genetic diseases. The genes are, first of all, we can't even define what a gene is. This is a whole other topic. But anyways, that's just victim consciousness.
So what would be your biggest piece of advice for someone with cancer and then someone who is considered healthy or disease-free? So both sides of the spectrum.
So, yeah, first of all, as far as the person who's healthy, and I wrote about this in my book, there is no evidence, zero evidence that screening or in other words, going looking for cancer produces better outcomes. Zero. I personally haven't had a blood test or any kind of screening test for anything since 1984.
Wow.
That's because I was going to residency then, and they made me do a physical exam and a blood test. And I used to say, my mother used to say, oh, you should get regular exams. And I said, I do. 1984, and I have an appointment in 2034, and then in 2084. So that's regular. Every 50 years, I'll get an exam. And the reason for that is there has never been shown any positive outcomes from that. And the consciousness behind that is somehow they're going to tell me about how my health is more than I can figure out for myself. Once you change that thinking and you start tuning into how am I doing? And if I eat this, how do I do? And if I exercise or if I fight with my kids or my wife or whatever, or I spank the dog, which I don't do, how am I doing? And so then you continually self-modulate based on your ownership of your life. And I would really encourage people who are, quote, well, to think along those lines. And what are you exposed to? What's happening in your life? Now, in a way, if you've made the, quote, mistake and been diagnosed with cancer, sometimes it's because you have symptoms, right? So you go in and then you say, what are this? And they find out you have cancer. The next thing is you've been hexed. You've been told you have a situation which is misinterpreted. Like I said, a lot of this is you're actually in the healing phase. Your body is packing up this garbage so that it can deal with it. And if you just let it alone, and we know this now from studies with early detection of breast cancer, some like 40% of them will go away by themselves. So you've been hexed into thinking you're now in a life-threatening situation, and all the emotional stuff that comes with that, you've got to somehow unpack that. But it's difficult because it's hard to not know something you know.
Well, I think and here's my thought here is you're a physician. You've had all these years of training and understanding of how the body functions, treating so many individuals. So you have that knowledge, right? For us as individuals, sometimes, and this is me personally, this last go around, it was very interesting for me to test and then assess if what I was doing was really working in the way that I thought it was working. So for example, with my diet, and was what I was eating and doing and was told would be best for me, was it really reflecting in the way my body was absorbing it and processing it? And interestingly enough, my numbers went down based on what I changed, and it made me feel good. So it empowered me to say, okay, I am along the right track. I may assume that this diet is the best for me, but until I tested it with my blood work, I wasn't 100% sure. And so having that really gave me confidence and strength to move forward saying, all right, I am on the right path for me personally.
So here's a question for you, because it's an interesting point you bring up. Let's say that you had decided you wanted to know where you're at. And so you decided without any tests, I'm going to change what I'm doing, change what I eat, change what I think, change what my exercise, change my so-called detox, whatever it is, you're going to change. And then you felt better. That's what you said, right? Mm-hmm. Now, imagine then the blood test said, no, you're worse. What would you think then?
I would say I need to change something. If I was told, so let's say and here's an example for you. I was told to be on a ketogenic diet, helps me with healing and all of that, which it does, and it has been proven to. But for me, interestingly enough, it wasn't making me feel good. I wasn't able to eat some of the whole foods that I enjoyed. And so I changed it to a modified 70 grams of carbs instead of the 30 or whatever. And I felt so much better. And then I was like, am I really helping my sugar levels and my insulin levels the way that I think, even modifying? And so by getting that report back, I was, and all my numbers went down. And so I knew that, okay, I am doing something that's right for my body.
I get your point. It's an interesting point. I came to the conclusion that in that situation, if I got to a discrepancy between that you actually had the experience of this isn't working, I'm going to change it in this way, which makes sense to me, and then you felt better, I wouldn't care at all what your number showed. because I would say if you continue on that path, you'll be able to continually refine that. And I'm not going to not do something that a person clearly knows is making them feel better.
Right.
That's
Right.
the bottom line for me, which
Yeah.
is why I mostly stopped doing tests.
Mhm.
Because if I was going to believe the patient anyways, right? Patient said, no, I didn't feel good eating 20 grams of carbs. I would say, fine, let's try to eat 70 and tell me what happened. I feel much better. I'm good.
Interesting. And what about someone who's in a disease state, like being able to know that, hey, what I am doing is working when my CEA numbers are going down or my CA 125 and those cancer markers that
The
are like
thing,
a
the,
point.
the first assumption there is, you're in a disease state, which is already putting you into a situation that's actually not really true. What you're in is a situation where your body has to make some things happen, and it's actually trying to help you out. So that's already a different conception of where you are than a disease state, right? So that's the first thing. The second thing is, it is absolutely well known that CEAs and PSAs and CA 125s are not a reliable track
True.
of the actual
Hmm.
state of the cancer or the prognosis. Because
True.
we don't know whether that means that there's more of this being made, this protein being made, or the tumor mass is breaking down and therefore liberating it into the blood. And so you could have a situation where you're taking out your garbage, your tumor mass is breaking down, you get more CA 125 in your blood. You interpret that as this situation, which is clearly making you feel better and do better, and your skin is better, and your bowels are better, and your emotional situation is better. And that piece of misinformation makes you think you're doing worse. That is a real
Interesting.
problem. That, it to me, is outsourcing your agency to a test that turns out not to have been validated or reliable in this situation. That's a problem.
So let's move to the explosion of cancer diagnosis, right? We only have a few minutes left, but I really wanted to ask you this question. In the last 50 years, especially, what do you see as some of the main factors contributing to this increase, especially in younger people?
Well, in the last 4 years, it's probably almost all because of the so-called COVID vaccine, which is a serious poison. I mean, some of them are placebos, right? Because they wanted to shield the toxicity. So we know that some people got just nothing, so they could make the numbers of the side effects look better. So they basically use very serious toxic stuff, which we don't even exactly know what's in there. But then instead of a little bit of garbage, you came with a big dump truck and you dumped a whole lot of garbage, and then the people have to put it in bags, and we call that cancer. This is not rocket science. So why have we had more cancer in the last 50 years? Because people are looking for it, which is another trick with medicine. That which you look for, you'll get an increase in diagnosis. And they do that in very sneaky ways. They tell the doctors that you only look for measles in unvaccinated children. And then lo and behold, they say you only have measles in unvaccinated. Great. That's because you only look and do the test unvaccinated. And somehow we all, we don't all, but a lot of us fell for that. So
Yeah, it's really important for us to look at how exactly things are tested, what is the full information, not just the headlines or what is being given to us. And really important for everyone to be their own advocate, ask your own questions, really be curious to question things because you are your best advocate. And Tom, in the last minute or so, I really wanted to also make sure that you spoke about Dr. Cowan's Garden and the products that you use and how they're different from other ones that are out there. Can you briefly share with those listening about that?
all our products, and whether they're the Dr. Tom Cowan or Dr. Cowan's Garden, we look for quality because there's a whole lot of reasons for that. And the same with the curriculum and the clinic. This is a whole different way of looking at the world, which is a quality-based rather than measuring zinc levels and iron levels and this and that. And for people who don't know what I mean, I would ask, quantity is how much stuff is in there. And I often ask people, raise your hand if you chose your spouse based on the number of hydrogen or sulfur atoms they have in their body, which of course you don't even know. But the reality is we choose everything in our lives based on quality, right? Now, here's the thing. Science doesn't recognize quality as an aspect of the world we live in, or medicine, or biology. There's no science of quality. Yet, the reason you buy this car or this table and not that one is because the quality seems better. Not the substance, the quality. Now, the substance has something to do with it, right? Because you can't make a healthy, beautiful house out of crummy bricks. But so we are a quality-based company. Everything from how we do medicine and how we teach and the products that we sell and how they were grown, how they were processed. Are we preserving the quality and the integrity of whatever the olive oil or the ghee or the ashitaba or burdock root or whatever it is. It's all about quality.
Yeah. And to give people an understanding of what that means is something can be said organic, and then there's regenerative, and then there's things that, how is the soil? Yeah, they may not put pesticides on it, but the soil can be so depleted that the nutrients aren't even there. The quality of the soil matters, the seed matters, and how everything from seed to finish is completed matters.
And the consciousness of the farmer.
Yeah, and the farmer, absolutely. So it really goes full circle. Absolutely. If the water is toxic, so will be what is produced. So thank you very much for sharing your insight with us today, expanding our minds to be more curious and to really see things in a different light. I really appreciate your input and all that you've shared with us today. I know your time is really valuable, so thank you so much.
Okay, and thanks for all you're doing
on
as well. I know you're waking up a lot of people to take a new look at this situation because we need to.
Yes, thank you. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support our podcast, please subscribe and share it with others. Be sure to visit believebig.org to access the show notes and discover our bonus content. Thanks again, and keep believing big.